Give advice to others, particularly if you're competent in the arena that you're giving advice, but then follow it. In my experience, particularly in Western countries where the chauvinism is such that to give advice is considered higher rank, and to receive advice, which is the feminine position, is considered lower rank, there's a competition to give advice and a resistance to actually receiving and following advice, because to follow is feminine, not male or female, feminine. To lead is masculine. So in all of the polarities of this nature, in a chauvinistic culture, there will be a competition to occupy the masculine space. The speaker, the leader, the teacher, the advice giver, the giver, and to avoid the student, the receiver, the follower, etc. Now, giving advice is good because it's an opportunity, regardless of, the cultural context in which it's received, to articulate what is a good and intelligent path of action. The intelligent path of action is the action that will result in the most sustainable well-being for the least expenditure of energy. That's what intelligent is. Now, as someone who learns by teaching, I give advice all the time. And in Western countries, almost nobody follows it. In Asian countries, a lot of people do follow it. Now, those that follow my advice, and I've tracked this over time, often see, just incredible expansions in well-being. Energy expenditure goes down or stays constant. Well-being sustainably goes up. And it's always tremendously fun to see this. I have a virtual assistant who I've never met in person. And during the time that he's worked for me, he's gone from working 50-hour weeks to 30-hour weeks, sometimes less, 4 or 5 hours, a day. Yeah, so I guess it would be 25 hours a week. So he's cut his work in half, his workload. He's doubled his income at the same time he's cut his workload in half. He's started taking vacations. He's now part of a cohesive family. He's bought 2 houses. He's doing yoga. So it's just phenomenal to watch all the different areas that his well-being has increased, and he's planning on retiring in the next 5 years at age 35. He's a terrific student, and he's from India. No American has ever taken my advice to the level that would allow that kind of transformation in such a short period of time with relatively casual coaching. But that's, more of an Asian phenomena, because of the cultural aspects. But I give advice in Western contexts all the time that 99% of people don't take, because when I try and solve a problem that I'm looking at, invariably there is some aspect of my life that has something to do with that. Everything can always be improved. So my protocol, and what I would suggest for you if you're in a Western country, is give advice in the areas that you're competent, and then follow it yourself. Look at what you just said, assume that the person you gave the advice to is going to do absolutely nothing with it, to their detriment in many cases, and then do it. Now, I do that with these videos. YouTube algorithm has little correlation to intelligence, one. Well, it kind of, I guess, depends, because if people are clicking on something, presumably they're looking for dopamine and adrenaline. And so the most efficient drug providers of dopamine and adrenaline are actually meeting their clients' needs for dopamine and adrenaline in a highly traumatized culture where everyone is busy trying to manage their feelings. And so perhaps it is a perfect algorithm. But of course, with all drug addictions, including the adrenaline and dopamine addiction, you suffer chronic, long-term loss of well-being in order to get those little hits short-term in more and more expedient ways. So, but nevertheless, when I make a lot of my videos, I don't assume that anyone's going to watch it, number one. Number two, if it's a Westerner, there's a high likelihood that the response will be to find what's wrong with it rather than to integrate any of it. And so, it doesn't necessarily make sense on that level. But one of the things that I often do when I, press stop and turn off the camera is I go and do exactly what I just talked about in some way. And my own life goes up in value. My own well-being increases sustainably. And that's a good reason to give advice. Look at the suffering around you. Look at what people could be doing better. Take the time to spell out what would be the most intelligent thing for them to do. You can do this in your diary. You can do it on YouTube. You can write them a letter. You can write them you can do anything you want to. You can talk to them. Then let it go. Assume that they're going to do absolutely nothing with it. In fact, if you've hit the mark and are really on the money, they may get quite upset with you because they've carefully avoided asking for advice because they don't want to hear it, and they're in a loop that at some level they don't want to leave. And so they may be furious that you've actually shown them the way out of a cage of a certain type. But that doesn't matter. What matters is how can you flip? How can you do one thing better or one new thing that you're not currently doing that integrates the advice you just gave? Because I would say, maybe 40% of the well-being that I have sustainably in my life comes from caring about other people, caring enough to think things through and make a suggestion, caring enough to give them the freedom to, in most cases, ignore it, and then flipping that caring and saying, you know what? What if I cared as much about my potential and my future? I just spent 30 minutes telling this person how they could improve this and this and this. But every part of my own life could improve. So for whatever reason, I didn't give 30 minutes of advice to myself. Therefore, And for whatever reason, that doesn't flow as easily. And that's what makes this a really nice kind of self-judo move. Advice for other people, particularly in our culture, is almost effortless. They should do this. They should do that. They could do this better. All they have to do is do this, this, and this, and all their problems would be solved. It's so easy in a chauvinistic culture to give advice, and it's so hard in a chauvinistic culture to receive advice. Because there's an element of shame. See, the shame is where the chauvinism is rooted. It's the face of chauvinism. Because if you're deranked for receiving, then you're not just receiving advice, you're receiving lower rank. You're receiving a dose of shame at the same moment. Now, if you can de-link the chauvinism and the shame and actually look at the truth, which is that anyone at all, who is in the presence of someone more competent than them, and give me a break, there is always someone, you may not be in the presence of them, but there is always someone who's more competent than we are. Usually in almost every area of our life. This person knows how to make money more than I do. This person knows how to make people laugh more than I do. And this is a good thing, meaning if we want to rapidly grow, we will surround ourselves with people that know a lot more than we do in every area of life. And then we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from them. So this is the single most intelligent thing that you can do. Now, the fact that the cult blocks us from doing that by saying that that's less than, that the most intelligent thing you can do is inferior to what? Reinventing the wheel? Cults are stupid, so they don't answer these types of challenges because there's no answer to that. I mean, it's profoundly stupid. And yet, of course, that's all chauvinistic cults are profoundly stupid because they cause massive amounts of unnecessary suffering, deviate from rationality to an absurd degree, and are so dumb they don't understand they're dumb. They just keep copying themselves and precluding vast amounts of insight, wisdom, and well-being for their members. Since receiving as a chauvinist is linked with shame, there's a resistance to receiving advice and asking for advice, but there's an ease of giving advice. And so this little judo move where give advice to others and then apply it to ourselves. And you know what? If our life, because one of the friction points that led me to this kind of particular move was I used to get annoyed that people didn't actually listen to advice that could dramatically improve their well-being. Just irritating. Are you committed to this? I mean, what is this? Now, the sting of that disappears to a great degree if I turn around and do something that day to take my own advice, number one. And number two, I experience my reality lifting, and then I'm enjoying a new reality. And from that place of greater pleasure and success, and also validation, right? Because some of the reason it's annoying when someone doesn't accept a gift or some advice is the idea that they must think that the advice is no good. And then that gets, well, my advice is no good. And then what kind of person gives advice that's no good? Someone who, doesn't have a competent mind, et cetera. And so all of that, is kind of a downer. Well, if you will validate your own competence by having your life go up because you took your advice, or go back to doing what you just advised them that you're already doing, or look at how to do it at a higher level, then your life becomes the validation that your advice works. And of course, if it doesn't, then wonderful that nobody took your advice, and you can now confidently give yourself advice, which is to learn a little bit more competence before giving advice, and then you can take that advice. And I hope this works for you as well as it works for me. I'm going to do it some more. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.